What's up, everyone? It is Ricci here, bringing you season 2, episode 23 of the F1 podcast. I'm here with Andrew and a special guest, Tyler. Tyler, thank you for coming on to the podcast literally 5 minutes ago. Erica couldn't make it today as she had something come up. So I really appreciate you coming up. Today is November 7th. We have a lot to talk about the Mexican Grand Prix that happened last week. Also, before we start, Andrew and Tyler are rocking some amazing Movembers. And Andrew, I'll just turn it over to you to start talk about like what your what Movember is, and if you want to promote your page, we'll make sure it's in the comment section. But go ahead, and hello, guys.
Hey, how's it going? No, yeah. So Tyler has a beautiful stash. I got the handlebars rocking this year, but I'm raising money for Movember. It's a raise awareness for men's health in Canada. Not many people know this, but unfortunately, my girlfriend's father, he passed away earlier this year due to some mental health and men's health issues. So as a result, I'm dedicating this year's Bro to him and my stash to him as a result. And yeah, it's a good way to not only just raise money, but raise awareness for health issues overall and in our society today, because it's gone beyond, let's say, testicular cancer and prostate cancer. It's gone way beyond that in terms of other health issues. So if you're interested, we'll have a link to my page down below, just so you can share with family and friends if you're interested in donating. And thank you, everybody, for the support so far. Appreciate it.
And then Tyler, are you raising any Movember, or are you participating in the campaign?
I'm participating through donating to the Movember Canada campaign, and also a friend who has a campaign going as well. So yeah, I echo everything that Andrew said. I highly encourage you all to, number one, donate if you can, and number two, be more well educated on, the different types of issues that are out there. I think I read a stat as part of the campaign that for men under 30, mental health and suicide is the number one cause of all deaths, which is, really astounding. So, the more awareness we can raise, the more resources we can provide to people who are in need and are having all kinds of mental health crises is the better. So to Andrew's point, it's not just about, men's physical health, but mental health as well, which is, really, really huge.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Tyler, and obviously Andrew, for talking about this. I wanted to make sure, obviously, as the start of Movember started on November 1st. We'll make sure that both the Canada page and then obviously your link is in the description below on YouTube, and then we'll post that on our Instagram as well. So onto the topic of the Mexico Grand Prix that happened last week. Max Verstappen, 14th win of the season. I won't lie, the race was kind of boring. But it's always fun to go back to Mexico and just see the fans, particularly, especially that one part of the section that is dedicated to a baseball stadium. Well, it is a baseball stadium. I think it's something about 20,000 fans in that particular area. But yeah, obviously the constructors is already claimed. The drivers' champions already claimed. We're just curious to see how some of the teams were going to respond this weekend. But, obviously business as usual. Red Bull went out and pretty handily a 1-3 finish. Hamilton did make it a little interesting a bit, but we'll get into that. I guess I'll open it up to the pod. Just anything that stood out from the Mexico Grand Prix for you guys?
Yeah, I think I think Ferrari went back in time this past week with their car, a little horse and buggy action in terms of their pace.
You lose.
That's what it felt like. I mean, Ferrari were nowhere. They did anybody see them on TV at all during that race? I mean, it felt like they were just fifth and sixth steady throughout the entire Grand Prix. They were never really in contention with the top four, and they were also never really under threat from anybody behind them. They kind of just drove their own race. I mean, Leclerc and Sainz were literally in the middle of nowhere, and it was kind of weird to see. I don't think anyone was really expecting Ferrari to fall off that much. And, there's been a lot said over the last few Grand Prix about the way Mercedes has come back to the top three and have really gotten a handle on that W13 and all the struggles they had early in the year. But man, I feel like Mercedes has lapped them the last few Grand Prix. And I would be pretty concerned if you're a Ferrari fan, not only for the rest of this year and how competitive they may be in Brazil and in Abu Dhabi here, but moving into next year as well, because this is the base of their car moving forward until 2026 when the regs change again. So yeah, definitely concerning for Ferrari.
I think I'll add there, especially what I talked about in last week's episode, is like, we tried we knew that Red Bull was pretty much in a safe bet to win the constructors, but now at this point, with a couple of races left, we're kind of looking at Carlos and Leclerc and the team at Maranello to, let's finish the season strong. Let's try to get a win, a race win. Let's try to get P2 in the constructors. Like, let's get some consolation prize. Obviously, the season was a little bit difficult, and even Carlos Sainz, even though that he is technically having a career season, winning his first F1 race, and bagging a couple podiums there, he said that this is he's not happy with his season so far. With 2 races left, and Mercedes is now only 40 points behind. It's kind of it's very hard to stay motivated, but also I don't even think was Bonotto even in Mexico City this week, because I think we talked about that he was potentially back at Maranello, checking out the new car for next year.
Yeah, he's at Maranello, working on the 2023 car this weekend, so he won't be in Sao Paulo. What does that say to your team, though, right? Like, you just kind of checked out the door this season, right? Being, you're kind of, to me, you're checked out now at this point, and you're more focusing on 2023's car. But what does that tell you there's still a fight to have for P2, unless he doesn't care at this point. If he wants to be P3 and get that extra 5% of wind tunnel time, but we really don't know how much that'll affect, considering we won't know how much that'll affect for Red Bull next season when they lose 10%. So it's all relatively speaking, but to me, when you see your leader stay back and focus on next year's initiatives and check out of the season that's happening right now, it's over. And you can clearly tell with the development of the car being 58 seconds behind Max in the Red Bull this weekend, that I think Ferrari's kind of mailed it in for the rest of the season, and they're focusing on the next year.
It's kind of like a slap in the face especially for the fans that are going to be in Brazil and then Abu Dhabi to end the race. Like, it's you talk about like motivation, because earlier in the week, I know this is totally off topic, but how the Leafs were handling Sheldon Keefe and the locker room were handling the loss and the terrible West Coast trip, and just like what kind of message does that send? And like, in a sense, for Ferrari, it's like, if your leader, the one that's overseeing everything, is not even there to finish the last two races, like, does that mean he's returning next year? Like, is he going into hiding? I wouldn't say witness protection, but like, it's just it doesn't
Maybe.
really I mean, with obviously with Red Bull winning 14 races, I'd probably be hiding too, but I know it really I kind of question what is the motivation, and like, you still got to finish the season.
No, I think you nailed it. Honestly, like, from a team principal's perspective, your job is more than just developing the car, right? Like, you are the leader, the figurehead of the team, and the way you act and the way you show up, literally, or don't show up, sets the tone from the top for the team. And what message that you talked about? What message does that send to Ferrari fans and people who want to see Ferrari, put their best foot forward in the last couple of races here before we break for the winter? But what about what it says to the rest of the team, the mechanics in the garage, Charles, Carlos, all the engineers, the hospitality staff, everybody who shows up and puts in those long hours on, especially these flyaway races? What does that say to them? Why or how does that motivate them to put their best foot forward here to close the season? So it does really feel like they're just punting on the rest of 2022 and its championship or bust, when we all know that there's valuable money and also cachet with finishing second in the constructors. So it's a head scratcher for me.
That's why I think, as a team principal, you shouldn't really be that invested in developing the car from a technical perspective. So for instance, again, a little off topic, but it does relate. I'm a Colts fan, like an Indianapolis Colts fan in the NFL. And we recently have fired, today, our head coach, Frank Reich, because of just the way the team offense is performing. But, as the head coach, he was calling the offensive plays, right, and doing double duties. And as a result, we've got one of the worst offenses in the league, and it retires. But
you lose.
I think when you take a look at it, the head coach shouldn't have those responsibilities. You're overseeing your team in terms of your offensive coordinator, your defensive coordinator. And that's what our team principal is like. You don't see Horner being that invested in the car because he's got Adrian Newey there, right? A technical specialist who, he's able to tell Horner the direction, and then Horner can make the decision at the final at the end of the day, but he's got his people with him to, his experts to help make and guide that decision and be the leader. I think with Binotto spending, 50% of his brain on being a team principal, but also 50% of his brain kind of being on that technical side, it really it's the double focus does not allow him. I think is really hindering Ferrari. And I think he should, in a way, maybe go back to that technical side where he is great. Like, don't get, especially with the Schumacher days, like, he's really been able to develop a competitive car. But I think they need another leader that is really that can really manage the team going forward.
And I'm curious to see how that's going to play out. I did say that potentially Binotto might be. My prediction earlier in the season was that he was either going to not finish the season or be cut at the summer. And I don't know. We'll kind of see how that goes. But speaking about who's probably excited for the season to end, especially after this week, Fernando Alonso. I think he's ready to leave Alpine. I don't even think he wants to finish the last two races, and I don't think there's going to be some celebration. But another weekend of him DNFing, and the car is, I think the engine blew, literally just malfunctioned or something, and just the rage that he had on the track this weekend. I think he's ready to. But also, like, you're going out to Aston Martin. Like, is it going to be even better?
Do a barrel roll.
Well, it can't be much worse given the reliability issues that he's had this year. And we've seen Aston Martin actually be pretty competitive the last few races. So who knows? Maybe with that, development curve that they've had this season, and with the extra wind tunnel time, they could be competitive next year. Who knows? But yeah, I mean, complete disaster again for Alonso. That team, Alpine, has completely sewered him. If you look at the stats, it's really astonishing. I think Alonso's had 5 DNFs this year to Ocon's 1. And that's without counting all the races where he had mechanical issues or other that didn't cause a DNF. For example, Canada, where he had massive engine clipping after starting on the front row and ERS deployment issues. He couldn't, finish the race there. Austria, he had issues. There's really a laundry list of issues that he had with Alpine. So even though he's going to Aston Martin, which, if you look at the constructor standings, might be a step down, I'm sure he's just happy to get out of there because it's been a rough season for him. And the way he's driven this year has been pretty impressive, and unfortunately just hasn't had the results through no fault of his own.
You almost wonder, though, if that's kind of a little bit of payback on, they felt that Otmar felt that he treated them with regards to signing at Aston Martin. So you never know, right? Yeah, right. It could be like that interesting team dynamic where they're not really going to give him any more parts, or not going to give him any, more upgrade packages because of what they did to him. Again, a little petty, but nevertheless. Because that's also hindering them in their fight with McLaren now. McLaren, crept up in the points again this week. Well, a couple, but again, only
both
7
drivers
points behind. Yeah, both drivers.
And also, McLaren has no business being that close to Alpine. No business. It's not even close, the performance of those two cars this year. So the fact that, to your point, they're only 7 points behind, and this is a real fight with 2 races to go is insane, really. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but I totally agree.
It also stems down to Gasly too, in a way. Just hearing him on the radio, hitting Alonso on the radio, guys aren't coming back to their team next season. They just do not give a shit on what they say.
They're burning bridges because they don't care. Yeah, totally.
So I think the radios are going to be quite entertaining for the next couple of races for sure. I'm sure everyone will kiss and make up towards the end of it, and everyone will have their team party in Abu Dhabi once the final checkered flag has been flown. But I agree, Tyler. Like, the way that Alpine has been, I guess, dominating that 4th place competition so far, and with Danny Rick not being as sniffing the points for, let's say, a good 85% of this year, you think that Alpine would have like a 60-70 point jump on McLaren. No, it's just 7. And so they can't really screw around. If they want that 4th place, which would be a very big statement considering they're the only one who used the Renault engine, right? And McLaren's I would say they're a very influential team globally, especially in the US now with the push. So I think it would be a very dominant opportunity if Alpine could pull this out, but they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot.
Speaking about Ricardo, he I don't know if you guys saw this, but they were promoting that he went to the Bills and Giants game. Was it yesterday? I think it was on Sunday. And out of all the go, Josh Allen has a horrible game. Like literally bad luck for Ricardo wherever he steps onto a football. Like I don't know if he's like invested in no, never mind.
Yeah, they lost to the Jets. It was a pretty bad game. But I feel like we brought in every single sport analogy we can to this F1 podcast. So
Do a barrel
funny.
roll.
But yeah, Danny Rick having no luck this season. Although good transition onto his performance this past Grand Prix.
Where was
because
that
he
all weekend?
Outstanding. Yeah, that soft tire, he made that work in the latter half of the race, and it was fun to see old school Ricardo with the finger guns and the late breakers into turn one, and he was picking guys off left, right, center, and it was fun to watch.
John, you say all weekend, like all year. Where
yeah,
was that? Like,
well,
where was that all year?
Sorry. I meant to say all year, but I didn't want to interrupt Tyler, so I just knew that there was an error. So I was just trying to be respectful. But yeah, no, it was probably his best race of the season.
By a country mile. Like this guy's got to start with a 10-second penalty right off the hop. Because as soon as he got that 10-second penalty, that guy was lightning. And I love the swagger back when he was going to pass Ocon. If you saw on the camera, he pointed the finger gun at him, shot him as he was going past in the DRS. I'm like, that's the Danny Rick we know and love. And that's the Danny Rick who's been successful in Formula One. The I don't give a fuck attitude. I'm going to go out. I'm going to go race my heart out every freaking lap. That's Danny Rick. And it was great to see it. Albeit it's way too late because he doesn't have a seat for next season. That kind of costs him. There's only 2 races left. So hopefully maybe they can do something in these next 2 races. You never know. But I don't know where that was all year.
I find it just interesting because obviously he has a career race like that for this year because obviously it's not been a good year. But then there's rumors that he could potentially end up in Mercedes's reserve spot and then maybe potentially go back to Red Bull because he's not confirmed for a seat this year. So it's like if he wanted a seat, like maybe he should have driven a little bit better. But I'm curious to see how this is going to play out. Another also impressive drive this weekend, Valtteri Bottas, which, he had a very good start to the season. And then the car has just not able to produce. There's been a lot of engine issues, particularly with the Ferrari engine this season, but he was able to get back into the points for, I don't know what the stat is, but I think it's definitely a few races in a row that he was not able to score points. So
since Canada, he hasn't scored a point since Canada. That's half a season ago. It was incredible. Yeah.
We were there.
I know. The last time that Valtteri Bottas scored a point in Formula One, we were at the Grand Prix, and that was in mid-June. So to see him score a point, albeit only 1 for 10th, was nice. And I'll be honest, I was a bit disappointed in his race, and it was the classic Valtteri Bottas where he was outstanding in qualifying, as he always is, and then disappointing in the race. His race pace wasn't really there. His racecraft, as we know, is not the strongest suit of his driving style, but still, regardless, good to see him pick up a point there in that race. But again, qualifying, he split the Ferraris. He out-qualified Charles Leclerc on pure pace. And, for all the problems with Ferrari, that's still incredibly impressive in an Alfa Romeo that's been pretty poor, I'd say, since the first 5 or 6 races of this year.
And that's back-to-back years for Valtteri in Mexico where he's qualified strong, albeit last year he did get spun out in the first lap by Danny Rick, but just wasn't able to fight back into the field from, with that rocket of a Mercedes that they had. He couldn't fight back into the points. So I agree. It's just, maybe some people, it's the track, right? I think some people like Mexico, and it's kind of unique dynamic where you have these like long straights, then these really slow corners and a weave. I find it's a very interesting track in the sense that, but I find it's terrible to pass on, and you almost kind of wonder if they need to do a track layout change somewhere in order to make racing a little stronger there.
Yeah, I mean, I think they just need to take a look at, redefining the track layout. They did something similar with Abu Dhabi, so we know that it's possible. You just need to put in some investment. And with the way Formula One's going, we know they're not short of cash. So Yeah, I'd like to see them do something with Sector 3 in particular, the stadium section, as you guys alluded to. It's too slow and it's way too or not flowy enough, right? It's too hard for drivers to follow through Sector 3. And so that even though you have, the altitude and the long DRS straight down the pit straight, guys can't follow close enough to get to the DRS zone in order to pass, right? We see guys with, 8, 9, 10s, barely under a second by the time they get to the DRS line because they can't follow through that tight and twisty Sector 3. So they got to look at, maybe revamping that section. And then also basically all of Sector 2. I mean, you can't pass anywhere on that track. The only place you can pass is into turn 1 is what it feels like. So they got to look at, reconfiguring the layout to be able to, help even these cars pass on that circuit.
I think it's turns 4 through 7 where it's like the weird arrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, they could really do what they did in Abu Dhabi, where they did the hair point. It used to be the hairpin after the first DRS straight, and or the second one, they turned it into a big curve.
Yeah.
Like a 180 curve. They could do the same thing there. I almost think it's like those, like Abu Dhabi's old format, it was a showcase, it's a showcase layout in terms of the track, right? That's why in the stadium section, they have those slow turns so that people can enjoy the Formula One spectacle that are sitting in the stadium, along with those stadium seating rounds 4. I think it's turns 4 through 7 at the end where it's so slow, so people can take the turn and watch, right? So they have a few more years there, right? People seem to love racing there, but you have to question it because we did hear some scary situations that did happen this weekend with regards to fans. About security issues. So you almost kind of wonder if there's maybe a different connotation or a different viewpoint now going forward.
Yeah, I guess so. I was hoping to kind of talk about that. I think Kim Illman, he did a couple of videos, segments on this, just like how apparently how crazy it was just in the paddock area, particularly, where fans were rushing up to drivers, and drivers couldn't barely move. Apparently, some of the drivers even said they potentially almost got like pickpocketed. And I don't know. Obviously, they need to review. We talk about reviewing the track and maybe changing things, but some of how the security is dealt with there, because we obviously want fans to meet their drivers, but swarming something like that doesn't really obviously sit well and kind of limits the ability for fans to really enjoy the experience. And last thing you want to do is be behind a gate for 4 or 5 hours and not even see a soul of a driver unless it's 100 feet away.
Yeah, 100%. And I think what this is it shows Formula One getting a little bit greedy with how many paddock passes they gave out. I don't know if you guys got a chance to look this week, but Liberty Media, the owners of Formula One, released their Q3 earnings this past week. And as the CPA that I am, I looked through their earnings report because I was curious. And if you look at their Formula One revenues, their primary Formula One revenue, they call it, which is merchandise, tickets, event fees, things like that, was up about 7%. So it's up, but not by a massive amount, because if you think about it, last year in 2021, the races were also full. We were at the end of this amazing, title battle, and people were rushing to watch Formula One. But what's interesting is that secondary F1 revenue, they call it, which is the more premium perks, such as paddock passes and things like that, was up 63% from last year. 63%, an insane amount of growth. So it's interesting that you bring that up, John, because clearly what that says to me is that they are jam packing these paddocks because they can sell these passes for thousands of dollars at huge margins, and they rake in money, and they're getting a bit too greedy because they're compromising the safety of their drivers and personnel who are trying to do their job on an F1 weekend for a little bit of extra cash. So it's very fitting that news came out just after, we heard all these reports of the issues in the paddock at the Mexico Grand Prix.
And you almost wonder too if that's going to ruin the fan experience next year, because people are going to talk, right? And effectively, people are, when they pay that amount of money, they're expecting an exclusive service, right? That you're there, you're going to be in the paddock, you're going to be able to connect with the driver, but you don't expect everybody to be in the paddock. So again, yeah, I agree. Getting a little greedy, especially 63% is an insane jump, insane growth, right? So at what point does revenue growth compromise safety to your drivers and to your staff?
Yeah, 100%.
Well, it's definitely interesting to see that. Obviously we've seen a lot of events, like, they try to jam pack people in, and obviously some things happen. But like also look at Las Vegas already for next year. Like the event, it's not even 1 year out, and it's apparently going to be the most expensive race possible. Like hotel rooms, I think I forgot. I'll have to find the tweet. I'll add in the video. Something like it was maybe like $200 or something. Now they're like averaging out to $500 a night just for that weekend or something. And it's like, and I could only imagine, well, that's just on the strip. I can only imagine what like at Fairmont. Yeah, I think old New Vegas. I don't know. I forget what that term is. Fremont, that area of Fremont, could be even cheaper, but still, like, it's going to be a wild weekend there, because they had their F1 post party this weekend, I think, at Caesars, pre-party.
It was cool watching Checo just in the helmet cam drive down the strip, and we're getting a little taste of what that race is going to look like next.
Not gonna lie, it's going to be cool, but hell expensive.
Did you guys see one of the promo parties they had? They had Checo there, as you mentioned, but they also had Lewis Hamilton and George Russell there. And before one of their appearances, they had like a promo video going up. And as part of the video, they were showing highlights from Abu Dhabi 2021, just rubbing salt in the wound to Lewis Hamilton, who's clearly backstage. He can hear it. He's watching it. It was hilarious. That was literally the last clip they showed before they introduced him on stage. So funny. So funny.
Oh, man.
Yeah, that's a rough one.
Or there's the take of, I think was it Martin Brundle that was doing like kind of the interviews or whatever at the stage, and then he made a comment about, and George is like, well, technically he should have his 8th title, but I know there's been some beef with Sky Sports and Red Bull, and I think I just saw today Sky Sports' president is going over to Red Bull to kind of appease some of the tensions going on.
Wow.
Well, I understand like everyone's disdain still, but can we get over it? It's been a year, and when Kravitz, God love the guy, but when
it's Ted Kravitz, sorry, not Martin Brundle.
But when you keep making like these backhand comments about, oh, he should have been the 8th title, I mean, Max can't control this. Okay, Max had nothing to do with it. It's all about Massey. It was FIA. Yeah, sure. And don't tell me both sides did not. I hate bringing it back up, but don't tell me both sides didn't lobby for them to, have the safety car not go or have that one lap race, right? It's not Max's fault. Okay. Yeah. It's if you have beef, go to the FIA. Don't take it out on the driver who won the title last year, because of, he didn't end up making the call to have that one final race lap.
But you nailed it off the start with what you said first, which is it's over. It happened. We did the whole post-mortem where we went through all the issues and people got to complain. And Ted Kravitz got to do his Ted's notebook, where he got to complain about all the things that happened in Abu Dhabi. We've been through this. We've seen the reports. We've talked about it at length. It's done. The championship isn't going to change. So, people just need to move on. And that's the key, right? Like, there are people, Ted Kravitz included, who haven't let go yet. And that's the frustrating thing.
Also, we could just re-transfer over to Brazil. It's just so, because I actually was going to mention this. Lewis Hamilton received an award, I guess, in Brazil. I don't know what exactly it was, but kind of question. I was like, is this kind of his like farewell tour? Like, I don't know if any of you guys saw that he won an award in Brazil today.
I think that was his. He became an honorary citizen, right, in the winter. So I think it's the first time he's actually been able to go to Brazil since that happened. So it was a bit of a honorary citizenship type ceremony. But I know Hamilton is pretty popular in Brazil, so it may have had something to do with that. But I mean, it sounds like he's going to stick around. That he was talking last week that he's looking to re-up for 2 or 3 more years. So I don't know if he's ready for a farewell tour just yet.
Yeah, it'd be cool. It'd be curious to see when he wants to hang up the boots. But like, obviously, towards the end of the season, maybe he still got that fire. Maybe that fire was not there for the first half, but I think the second half has really proved it. I guess any last kind of comments as we kind of look towards Brazil this weekend? I mean, it's gonna obviously there's a lot of history that happens in Brazil, and we've seen a lot of titles, a lot of races kind of happen. be competitive, or kind of there's something, obviously, what are we kind of looking for in Brazil this weekend?
Lots and lots of rain, people. It is going to downpour all weekend. There's going to be thunderstorms. So be prepared. Make sure you have your coffee ready, because knowing the FIA, we're going to be starting this race 2.5 hours afterwards, getting that 30-minute timed event in probably. So make sure you keep your Saturday and your Sunday open, people, because it is a sprint and a full race this weekend.
Yeah, and to your point, I'm looking forward to seeing the sprint back. Overall, I'm not the biggest fan of the sprint races, and I know they want to extend it to more, and I'm pretty content with it being 3, and if it's 6, so be it. But the one thing we do get with the sprint races is some good drama. We've seen it in the past with, Lewis and Max at Silverstone last year. We had a great sprint race. We had a great sprint race earlier this season in Imola between Max and Charles. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that kind of shapes up. And then, as we've kind of discussed throughout, the pod, I'm interested to see what happens with Mercedes. Are they going to continue this development path towards, fighting at the front? And let's see if they can do anything against the rocket ship that is Red Bull on that big straight on the Sao Paulo track. So will be really interesting to see. But I think that's what I'm looking forward to this weekend.
I think for me, it will be my eyes just to see how Ferrari respond after like kind of a dismal weekend in particular in Mexico, and just seeing, like, as we talked about earlier this episode, how are they going to respond even if Binotto's not even there, calling the shots. I'm also curious to see, how if I think my bet right now is Mercedes is going to win one of these last 2 races. I think if something magical happens, or if something happens where a yellow flag and puts on the right tires, I could see either Lewis or George potentially could win this. But I think my money will be on if they can, if Mercedes can get away with maybe one win this season.
And also, to the fact that Haas is expected to announce their next year driver lineup this week. So something to keep your eye on. And maybe this might be the last race that Mick has to really kind of give a mark for his case to be the driver next season. So should be interesting to see going down the line, and how this race goes. I love the track. I think the track is a ton of fun. Last year we had Hamilton's magical comeback where he dominated through the field. So let's see if he's amped up this week, getting the honorary award or order from the Brazilian government, and maybe he wins it this weekend. You never know.
Yeah, I could see it.
I guess we won't know unless we tune in this weekend. We'll have full reaction, obviously, on Instagram. But it's going to be, I think it will be an interesting weekend. I'm actually have my Brazil espresso cup right here, just for this weekend's race. But as always, thank you, Tyler, for stepping in for this week's episode. Andrew, always a pleasure. This ends this week's episode. Obviously, we're on social media. I think it will be definitely an interesting weekend, and it's only Monday, so anything can happen until we go to qualifying on Friday. So maybe maybe Haas pulls a fast one and names their driver midweek. Somebody probably has to step in, and anything can happen. So on that note, Andrew, let's you want to send us off?
Ali, thank you so much for joining this week's podcast. Really appreciate it. To the F1 podcasting audience, we really appreciate your viewership so far, and we look forward to this week's race in Brazil, where the rain will be falling, and so will the champagne, hopefully, considering maybe we can get a race in. We don't know yet, but let's see if Lewis can march through the field like he did last year to win the Brazilian Grand Prix and set the new record for most consecutive years with a race win.
Oh,
Tune in
yeah.
to find out.